Okay, Algebra 1 fans, our topic for today, this is Notes, Chapter 8, Section 2 and Section 3. This is called Multiplying Polynomials. And before we start, let me give you your joke of the day. Why did the coffee file a police report? And the answer is, it got mugged. Coffee, mug, okay. So we're going to start with multiplying a polynomial by a monomial. So really we have two goals today, two objectives. Objective number one, multiply a polynomial by a polynomial using distributive property, and then multiply using what's called the box method. So we're going to start with multiplying a polynomial by a monomial. Now remember, monomial just means one term. Polynomial means many terms. So for example, multiply 2x parentheses, so times x squared minus 3. So to do this, when we do distribution, I always draw arcs. The outside value, the outside expression, multiplies everything inside the parentheses. So we'll do 2x times x squared, and then we'll also do 2x times, and that's a negative 3. 2x times negative 3. Now, typically we don't write this out, but I'm just doing that to show the multiplication that we are doing. Now, when we multiply variables, we add the exponents. So this becomes 2x raised to the third. 2x times negative 3 is minus 6x. So we're not allowed to add these, they're not like terms, but we can multiply. 2 times negative 3 is negative 6, and then the x stays like it is. Now what we have left over here, these are not like terms, so we are not allowed to subtract them, which means that we're done. That is the answer, okay? Or that's what we call the product. Product is what you get from multiplication. All right, let's take the example next to that. Multiply 5xy raised to the third times x squared y to the fourth plus 2xy minus 3x. Well, we're going to take the outside value and we're going to distribute, which means we're going to multiply by everything on the inside. Now again, you can look at this. For example, we do 5x to the first, y to the third times x squared y to the fourth. You can say that's 5. Add the exponents, that's x raised to the third. Add the exponents, y raised to the seventh. You can do that, but again, for the first couple problems, I am going to write out everything. So 5x to the third times the first expression, and then it's 5xy to the third, times 2xy, and then it's 5xy to the third times negative 3x. Okay, you'll notice that I'm not putting symbols between these, plus or minus. This is a positive 5 here, this is a positive 5. Okay, so we multiply here, that's x to the 1. So we'll get 5, add the exponents for the x's, that's x raised to the third, y raised to the seventh. Now 5 times 2 is positive, so that's 10. X to the 1 plus 1 is x raised to the second. Y raised to the 3 plus 1 is y raised to the fourth. Now this is 5 times negative 3x. A positive times a negative, so I'm going to write subtraction, 15. Again, for the x's, we'll add those powers, x raised to the second. The y raised to the third, there's no other y, so we just write it as y raised to the third. These are not like terms because the exponents are different for the variables. Therefore, we are done. Okay, so what we have here is a monomial times a binomial, and then we have a monomial times a trinomial, 3 terms. Okay, now what happens? How about if we do a binomial times a binomial? X plus 2 times x plus 3. Well, the method, there's actually 2 ways I'm going to show you how to do this. The first one is called distributing. Actually, what I'll say now is I say we double distribute because we distribute twice. Now what I mean by that is that in the first set of parentheses, we have two terms. I'm going to take the first term, which is x, and distribute it to the second pair of set of parentheses. So I'm going to do x times x plus 3. So this x times this whole thing. Then we're going to take positive 2 and also distribute. I'll draw it underneath my arcs here. Positive 2, that's a plus 2, times the second parentheses, x plus 3. Now we're going to distribute. Okay, so we'll do x times x, that's x squared. X times 3 is positive 3x. And then we'll do 2 times x is positive 2x. 2 times 3 is 6. Now at this point, we have to ask ourselves, are we allowed to combine anything? And yes, 3x and 2x are like terms, so we have to add those. And what we get is x raised to the second plus. Now when you add or subtract like terms, you add or subtract the coefficients, but you don't change the variables. 3 plus 2 is 5x. Don't forget that x. And then the plus 6 stays like it is. That is as far as we go. So that's called double distributing. Now the other way to do this is what I call the box method, which is like a times table. So I'm going to set up, we're doing a binomial times a binomial. I'm going to make a square with 4 parts. Now the first binomial was x plus 2. I'm going to write it going down. I'm going to put x here and then plus 2. And then along the top, I'm going to write the second binomial, which was x plus 3. Now if you think about a times table, this first square here is where the x's match up. Now this is multiplication, so I do x times x. Now remember, that's x raised to the second because you're adding exponents. And then this square here matches up with the x and the 3, so I multiply that. X times 3 is 3x. And I will put the plus sign there to show it's positive. Now down here, I match this up. That's 2 times x, which is 2x, positive. And then 2 times 3, to get the last square, see how they match? 2 times 3 is 6. You do have to be careful. You will be tempted to say, oh, 2 and 3 makes 5. But we're not adding yet, we are multiplying. So 2 times 3 is positive 6. Now look at what's inside in your 4 squares here. Any like terms? Yes. 2x plus 3x. So I'm going to kind of put a circle around those, or an oval. And then equals, we write down what's in the squares. So we have x squared, 2x plus 3x, we add those up, that is 5x, and then plus 6. And that's the solution. That's as far as we go with that. Notice it's the same answer as here. This is called a trinomial because we have 3 terms, 1, 2, and 3. And we will always put the x squared. The biggest exponent will always write that first. All right, let's try another example. Let's do 2x plus 1 in parentheses times 3x minus 5. Okay, so first way we'll do it is we'll double distribute. So that means that the 2x is going to distribute to the second set of parentheses. So I'm going to write 2x parentheses 3x minus 5. And then this is plus 1, so plus 1 also has to distribute times 3x minus 5. And now we'll go to work here. We're going to distribute. 2x times 3x is 6x raised to the second. Add the exponents. 2x times negative 5 is minus 10x. You have to be aware of the minuses. You got to be real careful. Okay, and then here we'll distribute 1, but 1 times anything is the same thing back. Now before you stop, ask yourself, are there like terms? Yes. Again, in the middle here, we have negative 10x plus 3x. So we get 6x raised to the second. Now that adds up to minus 7. Again, be careful with negatives. Negative 10 plus 3 is negative 7. So minus 7x and then minus 5. And that's it. That's as far as we go. If you were going to box this, again, it's a binomial times a binomial. So we'll do a 2 by 2 square, so 4 spaces. We have 2x plus 1, and we have 3x minus 5. Now you may be asking, well, why don't you put the minus in between here? Why don't you put the plus in between? And it's because I want to remember that this 1 is a positive 1, but this 5 is a negative 5. So I will always put the sign with the number, that second number. Okay, times table. 2x times 3x, 6. X times x is x squared. 2x times negative 5, minus 10x. 1 times 3x is positive 3x. 1 times negative 5 is negative 5. Now, once the multiplication is done, now you ask yourself, can we add and subtract? Do we have like terms? Yes, we do. So we end up with 6x squared. 3x plus negative 10x is minus 7x minus 5. So again, it's the same answer. It's up to you how you prefer to do this. Personally, I like to double distribute because I skip this step. I find it to be easier. But the box is a nice way to arrange it if you're more of a visual person. All right, so let's do a couple more examples here. Let's take number 1. I'll take this one by double distributing. So we're going to take 4x plus 5, and we're going to multiply that by 4x minus 5. So the first 4x will distribute. Oops. So 4x times the 4x minus 5, and then we take the other term, which was plus 5, and we'll distribute that to 4x minus 5. Okay, so now we'll do our multiplication. 4 times 4, 16. X times x is x squared. 4x times negative 5 is negative 20x. Positive 5 times 4x is positive 20x. 5 times negative 5 is negative 25. Now here's the interesting thing. Negative 20x and positive 20x, those are like terms, but when you add those up, they're opposites. Opposites add up to 0. So what we get here for our final answer is 16x squared, 0x, we're not even going to write that, minus 25. So this time we end up with a binomial here. All right, which is possible, that's fine. That's kind of interesting that the middle terms canceled each other out. They added up to 0. Let's do x minus 3. Now this is, you see a square here. You will be tempted to say the answer is x squared and then plus 9 because you square x and you square negative 3. And if you do that, you are wrong. When you square a binomial, you always, always, always get a trinomial every time. When you square a binomial, you have to get a trinomial. What I mean is this. When you square a value, you multiply it by itself. So I'm going to write this out. X minus 3 times, or raised to the second power means x minus 3 times itself. Now I'm going to double distribute. I could do a box, but I'll double distribute. Now let me show you how I do this. From here, I don't rewrite everything like this. I do x times x, that's x squared, and then I distribute x to the negative 3, minus 3x. And then I take the other term in the first parentheses, negative 3, and I distribute that, minus 3 times x. Now negative 3 times negative 3 becomes positive 9. Negative times negative is positive. We do have two terms in the middle, like terms. Be careful though, that's not 0. That's negative 3x minus 3x. That becomes minus 6x when we subtract, plus 9. Notice we have 3 terms. That is a trinomial. If you square a binomial, you always get a trinomial. So notice my mistake here was that I forgot I'm going to have a middle term. And so that's the end of part 1. Go ahead and flip it over and we'll do part 2.